That's right. Shop smart. Shop S-Mart. You got that?
I want the people to know that they still have 2 out of 3 branches of the government working for them, and that ain't bad.
It's all those flashbacks. I never know when anything is taking place. In the first 20 pages alone, I counted 3 flashbacks, 1 flash forward, and I think on page 8 you have a flash sideways.
Yes, I bet you have.
Did you know that wasn't me?
You have to let it all go, Mia. Fear, doubt, and disbelief. Free your mind.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the intersection of faith, family, and filmmaking. You're listening to Fearless with Mark and Amber, a behind the scenes of our filmmaking ministry, Fearless Features, where we are creating educational, documentary films about the issues impacting our culture and society from a biblical perspective, and pursuing truth above all else. I'm Amber Archer, and joining me is my husband, author, director, speaker, Mark Archer.
Hey, baby. What are you doing?
You can learn more about us and the movies we're making by visiting fearlessfeatures.org. It's also a great place to make that one-time or monthly donation if you are passionate about reaching the lost for Christ through film. Visit fearlessfeatures.org to share your support today.
I'm not arguing that with you.
Oh, yeah. I'm not arguing that with you either.
This is my only thing.
Hey, welcome back to another episode.
Back again.
First things first, remind everybody of Title IX screening down in Noblesville, Indiana, July 11th at 7 p.m. And special bonus, must be present to win. You can see a
20-minute teaser.
Yes.
Of Principalities.
You guys, I'm really excited for it. So we just were working on sort of a draft concept for artwork, and it turned out kind of dark and creepy because we are talking about dark and creepy things, especially when you start talking about spiritual warfare and just the targeting of the hearts and minds of children, especially.
I have no response to that.
Why don't you have any response to that?
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to make something. It is a dark film. It's
but hopeful, I think
it is hopeful.
Is
they're all hopeful at the end because that's what we do is Christian worldview and examining these things and
from a biblical perspective, and that's the best way for us collectively to see things change is when we all get involved. And if you don't understand and don't know what's happening, it's really hard for you to get involved or even want to. But we can't, bury our heads in the sand and pretend that it's not happening, because as we're going to talk about today, there are so many things, especially lawfare, being used to shape, the future and, our kids' future when you really think about it and beyond.
I had an interesting conversation a few days ago, speaking of working on a film like Principalities, and I've had a lot of people reach out as they've become aware of what we're working on, and they're well-meaning and they're right. They've said just be very careful about this, and but some people saying you shouldn't be even talking about this kind of stuff. And I push back on that to an extent.
Well, and when you say that kind of stuff, what specifically are you referring to?
Spiritual warfare.
Exactly.
And,
I just, for context for the listeners, because people, if you don't know, so what is Principalities? So you've got key interviews and takeaways that were not used, yet we talked about them in Dysphoria and the Mind Polluters, and you'll see new interviews. And speaking of that, if our listening audience just collectively begin to really pray, because we have been praying for a while now of the voice that needs to really speak into this spiritual warfare. We were talking about that. We know that there's at least one more interview that needs collected. So if you are listening or watching, please, if you could just pray during this process. The film is taking shape. It has begun. Once that ball gets rolling and the train starts down the track, it becomes its own entity.
Yeah, and I guess it's good to kind of explain again to the people who are listening who they're not in the film business, and so just kind of explain the process. A documentary is different from a normal movie with a script.
Mm-hmm.
With when you have the difference being a scripted versus an unscripted, and a lot of the quote unquote reality television that you watch on Fox, for example, is not unscripted. Mm-hmm. It is prompted. They go in with, here's the story we're going to tell, and they force that narrative. And that's why so much of it just seems so fake. I mean, all of these, I can watch a show and I can tell you who's being prompted to say what and if it's a genuine thing, because
Hey, and listen, we have girls in our house, and when the new DCC season 2 came out, Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders.
right.
So it's fun to watch, and there was a narrative in the last one. There's a narrative, empowering women, getting them better pay, which was good, but you could tell throughout the entire season
Right.
that this was the narrative. This was the angle that they were going for. And listen, it wasn't bad, and it was fun to watch the cheerleaders and whatever, but like you were just saying,
Yeah.
things you see on Netflix or Prime or whatever that are supposed to be reality TV. Listen, it's a script. So back to documentaries.
It is a script. It's more scripted than you can imagine. Yeah. And I reject that kind of, that reality. I've done that stuff for other people, and I know why they do it, because they want to have control. They want to roll in with, here's what we're going to do and here's how it's going to look, and that's why the shows are cast the way they are. It's just like doing a movie or any other TV series, except that the format is, we're going to make it look like it just kind of happened, and it doesn't. I mean, I could sit with you and watch a 20-minute excerpt of something, and I can rip it all apart and tell you why this is fake.
Right. And we're going to show you a 20-minute excerpt of Principalities, and you can come and try to rip it apart. And
but nothing about it is fake. The difference is
anyway. That's
the
what I was
difference
trying to
is
get
we
to.
don't go in and say, I want you to, remember we were being interviewed. So when Inwood Drive first happened, our first film, and there was a crew that came to Fort Wayne to interview us for German television.
Crazy.
Right? And she would ask us a question, and then we would give the answer, and she would say, okay, now say that again, only
Like
say
this.
Say it like this. And she literally was putting words in your mouth. And we were terrible interviews for her because we wouldn't say it like this.
Yeah.
We would say, and because we kept talking about God and presenting the plan of salvation to George Klopfer, she did not want to, and she actually stopped and said, okay, this isn't going to sell for German television.
I remember.
So say something more like this.
Yeah.
And we would say what we wanted to say.
Yeah.
And you could tell she was getting frustrated.
Yeah.
And of course, it never aired.
Yeah.
Because we were uncooperative.
Yeah.
Basically. So we don't work that way. We find people that we think can generally talk about a subject. And
who has a background in things, because all of us are good. Well, like, we're knowledgeable about certain things. That's just the Lord has created us all. One body, many parts.
Yeah. So we'll get a hold of them and say, can you talk about these things in general? But we don't send them interview questions. We don't send anything in advance. We just say, we're going to come talk to you, and then about this.
Here's the subject,
and let it flow from there.
Yeah.
That's how you get the really good stuff.
Yeah.
Because somebody will go off on a tangent about something, and then you start getting really good stuff. Right?
Yeah.
It's like the interview we did with Steve Airy.
Yeah.
And neither of us had any idea that he carried a
crosswalker
from Evansville, Indiana to San Francisco.
It was
what?
It was just a conversation. That's the thing. We're not going in with specific questions, and there's nothing like, hey, gotcha kind of things. Right. We're just people sitting down and having a conversation to better understand and learn from each other. And he started in, and And he wanted to go past it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, no, time out.
No. You brought this up. We need more information.
Yes. So anyway, I'm not sure how we diverted. Oh, we were talking about Principalities.
Oh,
Let's say Title IX screening, July 11th.
Yeah.
Noblesville, Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
Life Church. Information at the links below.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Anything else you'd like to add?
And
come and check out the new Principalities.
Yeah. And let's see what any other updates. We're still waiting on Amazon for the other two.
Still in review with the other two, Dysphoria and Title IX.
They haven't been rejected, so you think there's a chance? Hey, if they took the mind polluters.
Listen, how long? 3.5 years?
Yeah.
That we've been waiting.
Yeah.
So we press on.
Yeah. So,
persevere.
So keep us in your prayers, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's all I have on that. So we have some interesting things to talk
Moving
about.
on, of course, big news over the last week.
The Supreme Court rulings.
Yes,
Very
Supreme
interesting.
Court. So this one article here that you handed me, Supreme Court boots challenge to state defunding Planned Parenthood in major pro-life victory. Woohoo!
Mm-hmm.
Which I was very excited because, again, when you go through and you start to read and dissect, because it was I don't know how long. I'll leave the links to the actual ruling and the case and everything. But there's a Fox article here. So this was Medina versus Planned Parenthood South Atlantic. The ruling came down June 26th. So what's the case about? The issue was whether individual Medicaid recipients, like patients of Planned Parenthood, can sue state officials for excluding providers under the Any Qualified Provider Clause. So the background was South Carolina excluded Planned Parenthood from Medicaid, citing the state law against funding abortion providers. A patient sued, claiming her rights to choose Planned Parenthood was violated. So now the SCOTUS ruling, the court ruled that Medicaid law does not give individuals the right to sue the state. Only the federal government may enforce funding compliance. So here from Fox News, the Supreme Court ruled Thursday that South Carolina has the power to block Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood clinics in a technical interpretation over healthcare choices that has emerged as a larger political fight over abortion access. Okay. It is, well, let me keep going here, because I've sat and already studied it and had quite a few thoughts. But the case, Medina versus Planned Parenthood South Atlantic, centers on whether low-income Medicaid patients can sue under what is known as Section 1983, a part of the Civil Rights Act. Hey, Title IX.
Title IX's about.
Is a Civil Rights Act issue, part of the Civil Rights of 1871, in order to choose their own qualified healthcare providers. It involves South Carolina's blocking of Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood South Atlantic, which the organization argued violated federal law. In a 6-3 decision, the court noted that the typical redress for such a violation would be for the Secretary of Health and Human Services to withhold Medicaid funding from the state, not for an individual to sue the state. Section 1983 permits private plaintiff to sue for violations of federal spending power statutes only in atypical situations where the provisions in question clearly and unambiguously confers an individual right. Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote in the majority opinion, ruling that the law in question in the present case is not such a statute. Okay. And it goes on. I will leave a link to this because it's lengthy.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we're talking about civil rights, and I think that's the thing that people need to understand. It's kind of one of the things as we have really done a deep dive here into education and everything that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
What we continue to see over and over again is how the laws are being used, how the courts are being used, how the education system and institutions are being used to really shapeshift.
Yeah, that's more accurate than not.
That's not what I was. That's not what I was.
A nation of shapeshifters.
Got a little tongue tied there. My brain is working faster than my mouth at the moment. Hang on. No, just how all of these entities, when we're not paying attention, are what's exactly being used to change our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't realize how important it is to pay attention to lawfare and our elected officials, because, you know, now that the courts are ruling in favor of the state, the entities like Planned Parenthood and the other NGOs and everything, everybody's who's advocating for more ideological frameworks in society,
Mhm.
they're trying to bypass Congress
Yeah.
and the laws.
All the time.
And so when
If they have control of Congress, they'll use it and they'll say you're trying to bypass.
yes,
If they don't have control of Congress, then they scream Constitution
right.
and they'll use lawfare to go around you.
Right. And so we are seeing such an increase and uptick of the way that the courts especially are being used. So, you know, appointment of judges is really important.
Yeah.
You know, and we have those on our ballots when we're paying attention. So,
You know, it's interesting. I took our oldest daughter yesterday. We went on a daddy date, and I wanted to take her downtown so the Lincoln Tower in downtown Fort Wayne was built in the 30s, and I know way too much about the Lincoln Tower because I shot my first movie there.
yeah.
And when we shot our movie there, the building was 3/4 vacant. And so I have been in every nook and cranny of that building, and I know all about it. But there's a soda fountain on the first floor. And so we went there, and it's not very good anymore. But we went across the street.
Not what it once was.
That's not what it once was. We went across the street to the courthouse, the Allen County Courthouse, and we've been in a lot of courthouses and a lot of state houses. The Allen County, Indiana Courthouse is gorgeous. It's one of the prettiest. And we were upstairs looking at the murals, and
I think you're biased, by the way.
I am, but we were looking at the murals on the ceiling, and there's these big, stands with explanations, all the history of the murals and how the people, the artists even, and let's face it, artists tend to be on the wackadoodle liberal end of things. But even
Welcome to our world.
even back then, the late 1800s, and you've got an artist doing these murals that were, interestingly enough, done in two pieces and brought in and assembled. You can't even see the seam. They did it like that on purpose. So it wasn't like the Sistine Chapel where he was laying on his back painting. But the explanations of the pictures, one corner is law and order, one is justice, one is, and it's the picture between the two sides of despotism and anarchy versus law and order and justice, and war is up there too. And I think, if people would just stop and learn from those who grew up in these formative war years, for example, listen to what they were telling you, look up and look at the pictures. Everything has meaning in it, and it explains in these explanations what everything in the picture represents. It's all representative. And we've talked about this a lot on our podcast, is the symbolism of things and how important it is. It's very important to the communists, to the left. And it's all of their symbols mean something to them. We'll talk on the second half about what's happening in New York in particular, but what we've seen in our country is they are trying to do what's called a color revolution. And that means when you talk about the colors, raise the colors, that's the flag, that's represents, that's the symbol of your nation, of your unit, right? And so that's what they're trying to do. They literally want to. That's what happened during Biden. color revolution. They hoisted the rainbow pride flag over our embassies. That's a color revolution.
How about them flying at the White House?
Yeah.
Let's just be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah. That's a color
Don't
revolution.
get me started.
So that's
Those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
mm-hmm.
I was thinking of that quote. I knew I'd butcher it, even if I.
Yeah, that's why history is so important. You got to pay attention.
Yeah.
And if your kids are in public school, even in private schools, they are not teaching history like they should. They're not teaching the real history of America and why things are the way they are. You got to be very cautious about.
Well, I wouldn't
what they're
say
teaching
I,
from.
I wouldn't say that they're not teaching it the way that they should. I think that it's become very selective, and so it's not.
It varies by state,
Yeah.
but in California, I mean, is it? I don't remember if it's dysphoria or Title IX. I think it's Title IX where we have the woman in the school district in California who's being confronted about why they're teaching pederasty,
Yes.
pedophilia,
Yes.
and the history of it through the Greek states and things like that. Well, yeah, they're teaching history, but that's the history they're teaching.
Yes.
Yeah. Color revolution. We're gonna teach this instead of why America is the greatest nation ever. So,
Moving on. What you got?
I have just have one. I don't want to go into it in too much detail, but just to acknowledge this, what happened in Ireland. That, and this is a Fox News article. Irish officials have begun excavating the grounds of a former home for unwed mothers, which authorities say contains the remains of about 800 babies and young children who died there. The former Bon Secours mother and baby home in Western Ireland, which closed in 1961 and was run by Catholic nuns, was one of many mother and baby homes during the 20th century in the European country. The homes housed unmarried pregnant women as well as tens of thousands of orphans. Historian Catherine Corliss tracked down death certificates in 2014 for nearly 800 children who died at the home between the 1920s and 1961. However, she could only find a burial record for one child.
Wow. Okay.
A mass grave was later discovered by investigators in an underground sewage structure at the home. DNA analysis found the structure contained the remains of infants and young children between the ages of 35 weeks gestation and 3 years old.
Okay, that's really sick.
Well, it reminded me, of course, of Klopfer.
Yeah. Inwood Drive, you can watch it on Prime today.
It's... And this was in the 20s, between the 1920s and early 60s. And the Catholic nuns were the perpetrators.
Hey, it's exactly what you see in Inwood Drive. There is nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at this stuff and, again, history continues to repeat itself. When will we learn?
Yeah. So as Christians, what is it that we need to be reminded of? That mankind left to himself is evil. We're wicked. We're corrupt. Whenever you hear somebody say man is basically good, I need to track this clip down, but there was this AI engine that Google has. I think is it called Veo?
I don't know. That
is really good at generating photorealistic full frame video. And we are entering the age of deception. I mean, we're already there. But there was this series of clips that were going around that looked like megachurch pastors, right? And you just watch it in passing and you think, who is it that's saying that? It's not. None of it's real. It's all completely AI generated, and they're all saying the same thing. They're saying, what if what we don't realize is that God already sees us as good, And in watching it going, remember Yuval Harari in Dysphoria
Oh, my
talking
goodness,
about AI can write a new Bible?
Yeah.
The
That's where we're
age-
headed.
That's where we're headed.
Yeah.
And people,
That's in Dysphoria, by the way.
yeah, that's in Dysphoria, which you can watch on our website right now,
Mm-hmm.
dysphoriamovie.com. And people are going to, and somebody else asked a question. They said, how long until AI starts wars? Because we'll see things on Facebook and the
How many
news and all
times? How many times? I mean, I know I am not the only one, and I have really, and think about the algorithm and how it only sends you things,
that. Mhm.
And so, how many times have we looked at each other, and said, "I can't share this. This is so fake. This
Yeah.
is such junk."
Mhm.
And it makes a point,
Yeah.
but at what point, where do you draw the line
Yeah.
on the things that you share? Because are you any longer thinking for yourself?
Yeah.
Are you any longer actually studying the scriptures yourself?
Yeah.
Or are you just looking for bullet points from a search engine?
Yeah.
It's scary.
We should talk about that. So let's go to break and come back. You got to share the story about what AI said about us after listening to our podcasts.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll have to go back and find it. I'll have to go find it.
Okay.
I'll find it.
All right, we'll be right back.
This may sound really shocking, but it's not really surprising considering that international research repeatedly portrays that 0.5 up to even 3% of our male population has some form of pedophilic interest.
What they'll do is they'll pick this identity group, and their goal is to turn this identity group into a victim status where they can claim rights at law.
We must fight discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, and we must prosecute those who target victims for violence because of who they are or whom they love.
The Biden administration is amending Title IX to expand protections to LGBTQ students in schools that receive federal funding.
What's happening in the public schools now is a deliberate attempt to convince our children that they may be transgenders. It's being portrayed as cool.
Used to be fashionable by being gay. Now you're fashionable by being trans, and everybody celebrates you. Well, you want to be celebrated.
We are in a battle right now that is far beyond Democrat and Republican. We are talking now in the realm of good versus evil.
Okay, I had something else to talk about, but this is really good. We got to go with this.
Well, even just going back and reading it again. Okay, so somebody had suggested, they said, hey, go on to ChatGPT and, go and just start asking questions, analyze a video.
And to be clear, I mean, we've talked about AI. We're going to talk about AI again. It is a tool.
It is a tool.
It's a tool. You're utilizing super fast computers that can do a lot of things really fast.
Yeah.
And there are great things that you can do with this now that you couldn't before. Mm-hmm. So I'm not anti-AI.
No.
Not anti-technology. However,
I thought this ought to be an interesting task for it. And because somebody said, go and ask it to analyze a video, right? And I was like, oh, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the 2 videos that we did with Heidi St. John, where we shared our testimony, how we met, just sort of the genesis of Fearless Features and
if you haven't seen those, we'll put them in the show notes.
Right, I'll leave a link in the show notes.
You can watch hers.
And so I asked it, and it gave me back an outline, because I said, okay, structure this as an outline. What are even if you were writing a book, how would you outline this? And
this is again a good example of a productive way to use this technology, where you can generally these systems, and they're not all created equal. There are some AI systems that are dumb and some that are better.
Yeah.
And it's like having
an assistant,
a robot assistant, and you can give it tasks like this. And a lot of times it does pretty good.
Right.
And it's fast, and you go, it's not bad. It saved me 3 hours. Okay.
Exactly. And so it came back and gave me an outline, of chapters, suggestions on what you could call them based on the information provided. And then I started looking at some of what it was saying. And and especially chapter 4 caught my eye because it says Amber's role and ministry heart. And it says Amber's passion for communication and education, supporting the mission through community engagement and partnerships, and the role of family and faith in sustaining their work. And I was like, that's interesting. I'd like to know more about that. What is it that you're saying?
And again, it's watching a podcast interview and turning it into chapters.
Right.
An outline, basically.
So it gave me, and I'm not going to, I surely am not going to read the whole chapter. I mean, if you're interested in it, send me a message or something. But it's flowery fluff, right? And
because again, it had to be taught how to do these things. And so at some point, someone or someone's taught it how to learn, and it's crunching numbers and learning how to pretend, how to parrot back things that it's seen other places.
Right, because what happened was I was reading sort of this draft chapter that it wrote, and it was seemingly, I could tell you clearly weren't listening or didn't analyze properly when we were sharing our testimony, because somehow I ended up in the film and production world. So I was curious, and I said, can you expand the story told about where they met from part 1 of the video? Okay, because if you know our story and our background, we surely did not meet on the set of a movie or it was a bad movie if that was it.
Yeah,
like, let's just say.
I won't go into it. You gotta just go watch the interview.
Yeah.
And you get.
But here's where it's good.
Okay.
Where their journey began. The meeting of Mark and Amber.
I wish I had music.
Well, you can always add that in later. Every great story has a beginning, a moment when paths cross and destinies intertwine. For Mark and Amber Archer, that moment came in an unexpected yet deeply providential way. Y'all, it was a strip club. Ain't no providential way about it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So here's where it was. Here's how AI said that we met.
Okay.
Based on the video analysis.
Okay.
And the summary, okay?
Right. We should get Heidi on and have her.
Mark, already an experienced filmmaker with a passion for storytelling, was attending a Christian conference where Amber was also present. Okay, number 1, how many times have we said we do not like conferences? Why? Because we're usually always working them, especially for you.
I'm not sure where, literally, if you just watch that video, you don't get that. And I don't talk about any of that.
No, the two moved in similar circles of faith, but had never met before. Faith in what? Like what? Okay, so anyway, why did we bring this up again? What point were you trying to make?
The point I was trying to make is
you can't use it for everything.
You cannot trust these systems.
No.
Trust but verify, as we like to say. AI is not right about everything.
Yeah.
It has learned to lie about. That is just, it is fabricating things that don't even exist.
I don't even know.
Maybe if it searched somewhere, somehow, like I used to have a blog, and maybe I wrote at some point about that was doing a conference, and
I have no idea.
I have no idea, but just watching that 2-parter with Heidi where we're sharing our testimony, there is nowhere in there where you can get the idea that Mark and Amber met at a Christian conference.
No.
Did not happen, is complete, not even Whoops, I misinterpreted that. It's not a Christian conference. It's a strip club.
Yeah.
Not the same thing. AI.
So, just again, just beware.
I'm not arguing that with you.
I am arguing that with you.
Right.
I have no response to that.
Anyway, so you had moving on.
What was that?
Oh, no. What I was going to say was, and how dangerous it has become because it's now being used for like counseling. In the school, they're trying to implement more AI, especially for the mental health side of things. I mean, it can be used, but we need to be very cautious of how it's being used, who's programming these.
So I will make a prediction here. We'll probably see this in our lifetime. I would say because things have been so accelerated, it's only a matter of time before you'll start to hear this said more and more frequently. Well, AI can do this more efficiently. And therefore, we're going to start turning these critical decisions over to AI. And
How long before AI is interpreting law?
Very soon. AI will be interpreting law. You'll have AI judgments coming down. The scary, I am the law. The scary thing is when AI starts making decisions and it's got control of weapons. I mean,
what's that movie?
What with the Whopper?
Whopper?
War Games.
War Games.
Yeah. If you haven't seen War Games, go watch
movie.
it. It's an old movie. It's from the 80s. Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy. And that's exactly what it's about. It's about an AI supercomputer called Whopper. War operations, planned response. That's how much of a movie nerd I am. I know what it is. And the Whopper is given control of all the nukes. And it thinks that it's playing a game. And so it's playing war games. And it convinces the U.S. defense sector that it's actually starting a nuclear war. And the whole thing is just the computer. It's quite interesting. So on that.
Yes.
I'm going to skip over the New York story. We'll come back to that.
Maybe next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have this interesting article here. This is a Substack article.
Okay.
By a guy named Nicholas Decker.
Do we know who this person is?
I don't really know who he is. Looks like a young kid. It's called When Must We Kill Them?
What?
Evil Has Come to America. This was published April 16th, 2025.
I'm going to look this person up.
And he says, well, let me just read this. Evil has come to America. The present administration is engaged in barbarism. It has arbitrarily imprisoned its opponents, revoked the visas of thousands of students, imposed taxes upon us without our consent, and seeks to destroy the institutions which oppose it. Its leader has threatened those who produce unfavorable coverage and suggested that their licenses be revoked. It has deprived us in many cases of trial by jury. It has subjected us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and has transported us beyond seas to be imprisoned for pretended offenses. It has scorned the orders of our courts and threatens to alter fundamentally our form of government, has pardoned its thugs and extorted the lawyers who defended its opponents. Let's stop here. When must we question what we read all the time? Let me just go statement by statement. Evil has come to America. That is subjective. That's your opinion. You don't like Trump and his agenda. Okay. The present administration is engaged in barbarism. Please define. Give me examples of barbarism. It has arbitrarily imprisoned its opponents. Let's see some examples. Arbitrarily means lawlessly. Revoke the visas of thousands of students. Why? Impose taxes upon us without our consent. Really? Which that one really got me. I'm going, well, please explain that one to me. Seeks to destroy the institutions which oppose it. Are you talking about DOGE? You're talking about USAID? Yes, I would. But again, give me some examples. Its leader, why don't you just say Trump, threaten those who produce unfavorable coverage. You mean the networks and the newspapers that are printing lies, that are fabricating things? They should lose their licenses, their broadcast license. Deprived us of trial by jury. Where? Who are we talking about here?
I don't know.
Because I would like to see if you've got an actual example of this, and don't give me examples of illegal immigrants. I guarantee that's what he's talking about. Illegal immigrants are not entitled to constitutional rights. You're not entitled to anything other than to go home.
Can I, okay, while you were just sitting there, I took and researched Nicholas Decker.
Okay.
With here's his article, When We Must Kill Them. So and this is using ChatGPT.
Okay.
I asked it if it could please, I found a Salon article online about this because there's been a lot of chatter about this article. So I just imported it and asked it if it could give me bullet points to the article. And so who is Nicholas Decker? He's a PhD student in economics at George Mason University.
There's your problem.
He's the author of blog posts titled When Must We Kill Them on his Substack. He's a self-described liberal with a background in activism, raising funds for transgender youth and refugee aid. He describes Trump's administration as spiritually left due to its economic policies. Now, what did the essay say? It explores the philosophical and moral justification of revolution, lists government overreaches that might justify uprising, canceling the elections, jailing political opponents, ignoring the courts and Congress, imposing authoritarian rule. Famous line, quote, "Your threshold may differ from mine, but you must have one."
Right. So let me read it here.
Yeah.
If these he's going on, if these actions that we just talked about become normal, the government could arrest anyone and deport them to prison in a foreign land without hope of redress for no reason. Not true. Give us examples. It is nothing less than the total abdication of rule of law in this country. Pause. This is projection. This is the left. This is what the left does, and this is a strategy of Marxism. Take what it is you are doing and accuse your opponent of it. So everything that he's accusing Trump of doing is exactly, if you paid any attention at all, this is exactly what they were doing under Biden. It's exactly what they were advocating for, and he's going to go on and talk about it. There is no guard or protection against it. If this theory prevails, then it is the end of America as a free nation. I do not wish this essay to be a mere catalog of outrages, yet it is so far, and they're unsubstantiated outrages, I might add. The conduct of the present administration is as well known to you as it is to myself and can be understood by any sensible person. On it, no further comment is ventured. What remains for us to decide is when we fight. If the present administration wills, it could sweep away the courts. It could sweep away democracy. And it could sweep away freedom. What's his name? Nicholas. This is not a democracy. Surely in your PhD studies, you have learned that this is a republic. Only communists talk about democracy, actually. Sweep away the courts, which you have done, your party has done. Secret FISA courts, unchecked, for example, could sweep away freedom. You mean like what your party has done through COVID and imprisoning J6 participants without trial for years?
Well, and I just want to point out, because it's as you read it and you say, why is this important for us to understand? Why bring this kid and his ideas even mentioning them.
Go ahead.
Well, and I just look at it, and it's, if you're listening to this and you are disagreeing, just think about what we just said.
Mhm.
He is a college student.
PhD.
We're
working on his PhD.
Where are you sending your children, and how are they being influenced and indoctrinated?
Right. So you can take the stance of, I don't care what this kid has to say. Who is he? He's nobody.
Mm-hmm.
This is the reason why I'm reading this.
But this is
because
permeating culture.
This is permeating culture. If you want to understand who it is that you're up against, this is it. This is their mindset. Listen to this. If the present administration chooses this course, then the questions of the day can be settled not with legislation, but with blood and iron. In short, we must decide when we must kill them. None of us wish for war, but if the present administration wishes to destroy the nation, I would accept war rather than see it perish. And I hope that you would choose the same. That's all of that I'm going to read, because it is a 100% Marxist call to arms.
Listen, when you see the riots and everything, this.
He's trying to cover his butt by saying, well, not that I'm advocating this. I'm just asking the question.
Well, he did get a visit from the Secret Service.
Yes. Did he?
He did. They did not arrest him, though. They did visit him, but did not arrest or charge him.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. There were free speech advocates like FIRE condemned the university's action as inappropriate and chilling to the First Amendment rights. The university eventually declined to discipline Decker. So I don't.
That's no shock.
Yeah.
Universities are run by a bunch of left-wing lunatic cowards anyway. But it's just these few, and it only takes a handful of these total lunatics. Okay, so I will mention the New York thing. So speaking of lunatics rising to power.
Last thing.
New York City is on the verge of a Muslim socialist takeover thanks to mass immigration. This is why it matters. This is Todd Starnes. The nation's largest city is on the verge of a disaster of biblical proportion. New York City voters overwhelmingly chose a Muslim socialist immigrant from Uganda to be the Democrat nominee for mayor. Zoran Mamdani embraced his Muslim faith and his hatred of Israel on the campaign trail. He also openly advocated for a number of communist-era policies like government-owned grocery stores. Mamdani is the odds-on favorite to win the general election against current mayor Eric Adams, who is running as an independent, and talk show radio host Curtis Sliwa running on the Republican ticket. Mamdani has called for, here's what you're going to get, New York, and I'm just going to make, I'm not a prophet, I'm going to make a prediction because it seems pretty obvious this is what's going to happen. This guy is going to win. He's going to be the mayor of New York City. Mamdani has called for abolishing the New York City Police Department.
Well, that's going to go over well.
Ending cash bail, decriminalizing drug possession, and ending all cooperation with immigration agents.
Okay, and timeout. Just like we had Erin Lee on last week. She's in Colorado. What happens in Colorado does not stay in Colorado.
Right.
We're talking about New York. What happens in New York does not stay in New York.
Right.
Wasn't it just Michigan who were facing a similar election? Or did they finally... I got to look it up.
Let me go on here.
Yep.
Now tell me this isn't Gotham City. He also wants to abolish prisons. His platform also called for legalizing prostitution and sex work and banning all guns. The 33-year-old Muslim campaigned on a promise to abolish medical bills and private health insurance. He also wants to provide free fare on city buses, free childcare, and a freeze on rent-stabilized apartments. He said his proposals would be financed by a massive tax hike on the city's wealthiest residents. In other words, prepare for a mass evacuation of Wall Street and the Upper East Side, and don't be surprised if Staten Island secedes from the city. It goes on and on. I mean, you want to talk about outright lunacy and the worst of all worlds, a Muslim socialist.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, because he's Muslim, he hates Israel. He wants to abolish prisons.
Well, and it said it's the largest city in the United States.
It is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And New York City is so bonkers and off the rails, they'll do it. They will put him in there. And New York, because here's what we saw this happen. This was a couple of years ago where New York, who was the crazy DA who was going after Trump? One of them that was going after Trump. They were going after people out of state for things they had posted online that they didn't like. And the New York judges were allowing it because they were saying, well, because you use the internet and the internet crosses interstate commerce lines, therefore New York can charge Mark and Amber in Indiana and indict them for hate speech charges, for example, in New York City. Mm-hmm. Because somebody listened to your podcast in New York and you were saying things that are against what we believe. This is how they're trying to usurp the federal government's authority by, taking over these mass centers of power. Let's not forget what else is housed in New York City, the United Nations. Mm-hmm. And it is the center of our financial districts. Wall Street is there. So this is not by error at all. And he will, because New York is so corrupt and they have flooded New York with illegal immigrants. And that's what they'll use to bring a wackadoodle like this in.
Yeah.
Islam, we have to do a whole podcast on Islam and what it really is, but Islam, when we talk about doctrine of demons, Islam is the doctrine of demons. It's the most popular doctrine of demons. They are worshiping demons. They call it Allah, but it's a demon.
I'm not arguing that with you.
I got 6% left.
Okay, well,
I'm out. OUT.
OUT out. Yup.
That's all the time we have for today, friends. Thanks for listening through to the end, and be sure to click that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And share this with your family and friends. Until next time, march on, saints, and be filled with the Spirit.
I am the great confront. Are you threatening me?
Step aside, please. We have white privilege.
You're everyone's problem.
I am dangerous.